Hey everybody, I'm Marianne Williamson, and I'm a candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States. I want you to know what I stand for, what I believe, and what I will do if you make me president. The United States needs a season of repair, a season of moral repair, because we have deviated from the moral compass that is what truly makes us great. You can't be great if you're not good. And our goodness has to do with our democratic values and our humanitarian principles. A virulent strain of capitalism, not capitalism itself, but a virulent strain of capitalism came into being in the 1980s, and it has corrupted our government, and it has hijacked America's value system. What it says is that short-term profits for huge multinational corporate entities should take precedence over everything. Stockholder value is more important than the safety and the well-being of workers and community and environment. This wouldn't of itself be all that terrible, except that within 10 to 15 years after that, the money that exploded in terms of wielding influence in Washington became so great that our government has become, for all intents and purposes, a system of legalized bribery. And in policy after policy, our government does more to advocate for short-term profits for huge multinational corporate entities than it does to advocate for us. Obviously, that is the opposite of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, because instead we have transitioned to a government of a few of the people, by a few of the people, for a few of the people, because this situation has caused a massive transfer of wealth into the hands of a very few people, to the point where 1% of all Americans own more wealth than the bottom 90%. We need a season of repair because a lot of damage has been done. We have 93 million people who live near poverty in the United States today. That means millions upon millions of people, tens of millions of people, who every single day live in chronic tension and economic anxiety, not knowing really what will happen if they get sick, not knowing what will happen if one of their children gets sick, not knowing how they will send their children to college, or not knowing how they themselves will get out from under the burden of their college loans. We need to change this. Bad public policy has created all this, and good public policy will make it right. The first pillar of a season of moral repair has to do with economic justice, has to do with recognizing that we have created a wealth inequality greater than any time since 1929. We have decimated America's middle class, and we must take immediate action to fix this. We should repeal the 2017 $2 trillion tax cut, which gave 83 cents of every dollar to the very richest individuals and corporations, although we should put back in the middle class tax cut. We should stop all the corporate subsidies, such as $26 billion that we gave to oil and gas alone last year. For what reason? We also need to make the United States government able to negotiate with huge pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. The U.S. government cannot negotiate for lower drug prices, even though we have people in the United States even today who are dying because they cannot afford their insulin. Also, although I believe the U.S. military should be able to have every dollar that it says it needs in order to keep us safe, we now spend billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars over and above that to do nothing other than increase short-term profits for defense contractors. We should also say to those who have $1 billion in assets that 3% tax on those assets is reasonable, and 2% for those who have over 50 million. That is also reasonable. Now, when we do those things, we're going to have some cash on hand. And let's talk about what we are then going to do. We need a United States Department of Children and Youth. Every single school, every public school in the United States should be a palace of learning and culture and the arts. That is our greatest treasure, our children. And if you want to have an amazingly prosperous economy 10 years from now, what you do is take better care of your 10-year-olds today. We need to end this immoral way that we primarily base our educational funding on property taxes. That's wrong. The great entrepreneurial genius of this country lies in the brain of every kindergartner in every neighborhood in America. I want a massive realignment of investment in the direction of America's children. The vulnerabilities and the challenges of millions of American children today is so beyond anything that we're even talking about within the political establishment, and this is wrong. They have simply normalized the despair of millions of American children. Why? Because these children are not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they don't wield any financial leverage, so how can they compete with all the corporate money that floods Washington? But as President of the United States, I will make sure that we rescue these children. We will rescue them no differently than if they were the victims of a natural disaster. We will recognize that millions of American children, 13 million, are hungry. 100,000 American children are homeless. We have millions of American children who, according to psychologists, are experiencing a level of PTSD, which is no less severe than the PTSD of a returning veteran from Afghanistan and Iraq. We need trauma-informed education, we need community wraparound services, we need restorative justice, we need conflict resolution, we need community wraparound services, we need mental health services for these children and for their families, and we need mindfulness in the schools. The second pillar in our season of moral repair has to do with our national security agenda. You see, we have a corporate aristocracy in this country. We have transitioned from a vital democracy to a functioning aristocracy. It is a corporate aristocracy made up of insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies and gun manufacturers and chemical companies and food companies and agribusiness and oil and gas and defense contractors. Our government, as I said, does more to advocate for their short-term profits than to advocate for the safety, the health, and the well-being of us and our children and the people of the world and the planet on which we live. Now, when it comes to war and peace, there are simply more corporate profits to be made preparing for war than preparing for peace. But as John F. Kennedy said, if mankind does not end war, war will end mankind. We should have a national goal of leading the world on a path whereby at the end of this century, humanity will be at a place, even if it's not at a place yet where war is over, but where humanity will be able to imagine such a time from a reasonable place. Now, in order to do this, we have to look at what's happening now. We have a military budget of $760 billion a year, and our State Department budget is $40 billion. State Department has to do with mediation, has to do with development, and it has to do with diplomacy. Now, within the State Department, $17 billion goes to the USAID. And the USAID is long-term development and humanitarian assistance. In addition to that, also within the State Department budget, is less than $1 billion that goes to the peace-building agencies. Now, some people don't know what peace builders do, but in fact, peace building is a level of expertise and skill set that is every bit as sophisticated, and given some of the places where these skills are practiced, takes every bit as much courage as does military skill. There are 4 factors which make up what's called peace building internationally. Number 1, the expansion of economic opportunities for women. Number 2, the expansion of educational opportunities for children. Number 3, the reduction of violence against women. And number 4, the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. You see, desperate people do desperate things, and desperate people are more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. So whether you're talking about a corner of an American city or whether you're talking about another place in the world, we should see large groups of desperate people as a national security risk. And so whether it has to do with domestic policy or whether it has to do with international policy, the core principle on which we will stand if I'm President of the United States is this question: what policy would most help people thrive? You don't just take medicine, you have to cultivate health. And you can't just prepare for war. You have to wage peace. This is why James Mattis, before he left the Defense Department, said, if you don't fully fund the State Department, I'm going to have to buy more ammunition. The truth of the matter is we put way too much burden on our military because we let conflicts develop that should never have developed in the first place. Just like we practice preventative medicine, we should practice preventative conflict. We should practice a way of being that increases the incidence of peace and decreases the incidence of conflict. That's what the peace-building skills do. And that's what we'll do when I'm president, because we would have a Department of Peace as well as a U.S. military. The next pillar of moral repair has to do with recognizing that whether you're an individual or you're a country, you're not going to have the future you want if you're not willing to clean up the past. That's why it's time to pay reparations for slavery and why it's time to take reparative measures towards Native Americans in this country. Both of those things represent an underlying turbulence and toxicity that this country will not be free of until we do the right thing. Sometimes people talk about random acts of kindness, But when it comes to the moral repair of this country, we need more than random acts of kindness. We need huge strategized acts of doing the right thing. I hope you'll go to my website, Marianne 2020, to see my plans for all of these things, to see my plan for a Department of Peace, to see my plan for reparations, to see my plan for a Department of Children and Youth. And I hope you'll also see my plan for health care. It's called the Whole Health Plan. We need to enter the 21st century. Right now, when it comes to the way we treat disease, that's really what we have. We have a sickness care system more than we have a health care system. So my whole health plan has to do with far more resources that are given towards prevention, far more resources that are given towards protecting our food supply. The question is not just how to provide universal coverage, and my plan does provide universal coverage, but we have to go deeper here, as in every issue. Because if you don't address root causes of your problems, then your symptoms are just going to iterate into another symptoms down the road. And so we need to recognize that the question is not just how do we pay for health care. The question we need to be asking ourselves is, why are Americans so sick? Why do we have such a higher level of chronic illness than do the citizens in other countries of comparative wealth? We need to recognize that for 86 cents of every dollar that we spend on health care, we're talking about issues that could be reversed, diseases that could not only be treated but even reversed with changes in diet and lifestyle. So my whole health plan has to do with increasing the opportunities for health. I don't want to just be a president who provides health care. I want to be a president who provides greater opportunities for health. That means we have to look at the contaminants in our water. That means we have to look at the carcinogens in our food. We have to look at the chemicals. We have to look at things that will mean we will have to challenge those underlying corporate forces which get away with way too much because of all the deregulation that we've done. We need to give power back to the CDC. We need to give power back to the FDA. We need to give power back to these regulatory agencies that used to be able to say, if there's a carcinogen there, you take it off the shelf. This is why McDonald's, for instance, can't make the same French fry in France that it makes in the United States, because France, among other countries, will not allow certain things into their food that we allow into ours in order that companies can make more money. This needs to stop. What we need in the United States is an age of moral clarity, and that's what we need in a president more than any other thing. So what we will do in terms of providing greater opportunities for health, we will incentivize health. No more will there be food deserts where people cannot even get access to fresh produce. No longer will we act as though hunger is not a serious national issue. No longer will we be willing to allow companies to just put so many contaminants and so many carcinogens and so many chemicals and so many toxins in our environment, or economic policies that cause so much stress. Stress itself is a determiner of illness. We have to recognize that America's entire lifestyle has been so polluted. We have to recognize what all this economic tension has done. We have to recognize that what this corruption of our values has done is to make us less healthy. It has made us less healthy physically, and it has made us less healthy mentally. All of these things will be addressed in my whole health plan. I hope you'll go to marianne2020.com and you'll read about all of these issues. And the last pillar in a season of moral repair has to do with mass mobilization to reverse climate change. We all know that we need to do this. We all know that within the next 7 to 9 years, we need to sequester the carbon, we need to reforest, we need to develop green energy, a Green New Deal at a much faster rate. And we also need to deal with these animal factory farms, because if we don't do that, then the nitrous oxide and the methane will be so poisonous that everything else we do will fail to deal with the problem that needs to be addressed. If we do not have this mass mobilization, if we do not address in a meaningful, profound, and even radical way the changes that need to occur and create a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy, we could be facing a level of massive social collapse within 15 to 20 years, unlike anything we've ever seen. We could have large swaths of countries, even large swaths of continents that are literally uninhabitable because of the heat. And if it's uninhabitable because of the heat, that means you can't grow food there. If you can't grow food there, we're talking about massive food shortages, economic collapse, and even possibly hundreds of millions of climate refugees. We have to do so much to change this country, but that's okay, because we have everything that it takes. Everywhere I've gone, I've traveled all over this country. We have the people who know what to do. We have the skills, we have the experts, we have the projects. The problem is simply that that's not what we fund, that's not what we resource, and that is what needs to change. Americans are hardwired for great things. We're hardwired for big things. We're not even hardwired for small incremental changes, a policy shift here and a policy shift there. It sort of makes our eyes glaze over because we can feel that we're not getting to the heart of the matter. We're not changing things on a level of root cause. If I'm President of the United States, we will. And I'm reminded of something Franklin Roosevelt said. He said that the primary job of the presidency is moral leadership. He said that the administrative aspect is secondary. I respect political expertise, and we have a lot of great political experts, and some of them are running for president. But you could have the best car mechanic in the world, and the best car mechanic doesn't necessarily know what road you should take to Cleveland. That is what we need now in a president. We need a political visionary, even more than we need a political mechanic. We need someone who can see what road we're on, who can recognize what has happened in terms of the patterns of our history, where we are in relation to our past, and where we need to be in relation to genuine devotion to our children and our children's children. We need moral certitude, not private morality. Private morality, I don't think the government should have anything to say about that. But when it comes to public morality, I believe every citizen should weigh in. We need a new core principle. We need to shift from an economic to a humanitarian bottom line. And if I'm president, we will ask about every single policy, what would help people thrive? Because that which helps people thrive, that is what creates peace. That which helps people thrive, that is what creates economic abundance. Money doesn't come because of corporate chieftains somewhere who drop crumbs from their table in the form of job creation. That's the old trickle-down economic theory. And after 40 years, I think we all recognize it's been a failure. Where does money come from? Money comes from the creativity and the productivity of the American people. That's why every school should be a palace of culture and learning and the arts. That's why every young person should have access to free college tuition. That is why we should remove these college loan debts. Why? So that we can unleash the spirit, unleash the creativity, unleash the dreams, unleash the productivity of the American people. That's when people build their businesses. That's when people start their projects. That's when their people do creative things. That's when our people show up happy as employers and as employees. That's what we need to do to start a new chapter of American history. We need to end a very aberrational chapter, a sad chapter, a weary chapter. Let's move on now. Let's turn the page. Let's do what we need to do to end one chapter and begin something new. I've had a 35-year career helping people transition during times of crisis from the period of crisis to a period of opportunity. And all that a country is a group of people. So those same psychological and emotional and even moral dynamics that prevail within the journey of one person prevail within the journey of a nation. And I feel that my 35-year career doing that, discerning what's really happening, the deeper dynamics that have to do with what's going wrong and also that has to do with what needs to change in order to make things right, those things apply to public policy as much as to individual behavior. I bring that skill set to this candidacy. And if you allow me to, and if you choose, I will bring that skill set to the presidency. And we'll begin again in many ways. We'll start over. And that is what this country needs. Thank you. All my best.